They laughed at my job at Thanksgiving. My own father told me not to embarrass the family, and I swallowed it like I always did. But minutes later, a phone speaker filled the room with my voice, and every single face at that table went pale. How did the family disappointment become the sound they were secretly obsessed with? My name is Chloe. I'm 28. And if you ask my parents, that number should come with a checklist. A stable career, a title you can print on a business card, a boss who can confirm your worth over dinner. I don't have any of that. I don't wear a suit. I don't clock in. I don't sit in a glass office downtown. I work alone in a small apartment in Portland with a microphone, a laptop, and a cheap desk that wobbles if I lean on it too hard. And somehow, that is enough for my family to treat me like a cautionary tale. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and everyone is already expecting you to fail? Like you're not a person anymore, you're a role, a punchline, a warning for the younger cousins. That's what Thanksgiving has been for me for years. But this year was different. This year, my brother brought a new girlfriend. And the second she stepped through the door, I knew I was about to be turned into entertainment. My brother's name is Ethan. He's 31. He works in corporate sales for an insurance company, and my parents talk about him the way some people talk about athletes. Like his success is proof that the family is doing well. Like his paychecks are trophies they can hang on the wall. My dad, Robert, loves to repeat Ethan's bonuses like they're Bible verses. My mom, Linda, collects little stories about Ethan's clients the way other moms collect holiday recipes. Every time Ethan gets a new title, my dad practically grows an inch. Ethan is the kind of person who shakes hands like he's closing a deal, even when he's just meeting your neighbor. And me? I'm the kid who dropped out of what my parents called the safe business program. The one who moved into a tiny apartment. The one who started doing something they can't explain to their friends without wincing. To them, I'm the kid who never grew up. And Thanksgiving is when they make sure everyone knows it. The house looked exactly the same as always when I arrived. Same porch lights, same smell of turkey and butter and cinnamon, same loud football game blaring from the living room even though nobody was really watching it. My mom greeted me with that overly bright smile she uses when she wants the world to believe everything is fine. She pulled me into a hug, then immediately stepped back to scan me the way she always does. Not for warmth, not for comfort, for evidence. Did I gain weight? Did I lose weight? Was I wearing something respectable? Did I look like someone with a real job? I smiled and handed her the pie I brought. Homemade? She asked. Store-bought, I said, and her expression pinched for half a second before she forced another smile. That was the first little cut of the night. Then my dad appeared in the doorway like a man arriving to inspect a project. He gave me a quick pat on the shoulder, not a hug. Like affection was something he rationed. Hey kiddo, he said, you still up in Portland? I blinked. I'd lived there for 3 years. Yeah, I said. He nodded like that, answered something important, then turned away, already calling out to Ethan in the other room. And then Ethan walked in. He had that easy grin that makes strangers like him immediately. The kind of grin that says, I'm winning, and I want you to notice. And on his arm was Harper. She was pretty in a way that felt effortless, polished, but not intimidating. The kind of person who says, nice to meet you, and actually sounds like she means it. She wore a cream-colored sweater and carried a bottle of wine like she belonged there. My mom lit up like Christmas came early. Oh my God, you must be Harper, she said, practically bouncing. Harper smiled and handed her the wine. Thank you so much for having me, she said. My dad shook her hand with both of his, like he was meeting a future senator. Ethan stood there, soaking it up, already proud of himself for bringing someone impressive into the family orbit. Then Harper turned to me. Her eyes were warm, curious. And you must be Chloe, she said. I nodded. Yeah, hi. She smiled wider. Ethan's told me so much about you. That was the first time my stomach tightened, because Ethan never told people about me unless it was funny. Dinner started the way it always did. Everyone pretending we were one of those families in holiday commercials. The table was crowded with food. The candles flickered. The plates clinked. My mom kept asking if everyone was comfortable, if everyone had enough, if everyone wanted more gravy. And Ethan kept talking. He talked about his numbers, his new clients, his quarterly goals, his company restructuring, the promotion he was basically guaranteed next year. Every time he said something impressive, my dad would nod like he'd personally trained Ethan for greatness. My mom laughed at all the right moments, even when nothing was actually funny. And the whole time, I could feel the glances, not just from my parents, from my aunt, from my uncle, from my cousins. That quiet curiosity people have when they know you're the odd one out. I tried to stay small. I asked polite questions. I complimented the food. I refilled people's drinks. I played the role I've always played, the one where I'm grateful just to be included. But Ethan couldn't help himself. Halfway through dinner, when my mom brought out the sweet potatoes, Ethan leaned back in his chair and smirked. "So," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "how's whatever it is you do these days?" My dad chuckled into his drink. My mom gave a little warning look that wasn't really a warning. It was more like permission disguised as concern. I forced a smile. "It's going fine," I said. Ethan raised his eyebrows. "Still doing the online thing?" He said it the way people say, "Still playing pretend?" I kept my voice steady. "Yeah." My dad waved his hand dismissively, like brushing crumbs off the table. "She works with a microphone," he told Harper, as if explaining a child's hobby. "In her apartment." The table laughed softly. Not cruelly, not loudly, but enough. Enough to remind me where I stood. Harper's smile faltered for a second, but she recovered quickly. "Oh," she said, "that's interesting." She looked at me again, more directly this time. "So what do you do, Chloe?" It was such a normal question, such a simple one. And for a split second, I thought maybe, just maybe, this time could be different. I drew in a breath to answer. I was going to say I'm a storyteller. I'm a narrator. I write and record episodes that millions of people listen to when they can't sleep, when they're lonely, when they need someone to tell them they're not crazy for feeling hurt by their own family. I was going to say I built something real, but before the words could leave my mouth, my dad cut across the table. His voice was sharp, casual, practiced. "Don't embarrass us tonight," he said. For one heartbeat, everything froze. Then the entire table burst into laughter. My brother's smirk widened, like he'd been waiting all night for that moment. And Ethan leaned forward just enough to make sure I heard him clearly. "Maybe lie this time," he said, still smiling, "so you don't sound so pathetic." The laughter hit my ears like hot water. I felt my face burn. I felt my throat tighten. And I did the thing I always do when I'm hurt in front of people who are supposed to love me. I smiled. I lifted my glass. And I took a slow sip, like none of it mattered. Like I was in on the joke. Like I wasn't the joke. Harper looked confused. Her cheeks flushed. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then thought better of it. Her eyes flicked to Ethan, then to my parents, then back to me. I could see it in her expression. She didn't understand the rules yet. She didn't know this family runs on unspoken hierarchies. And I was at the bottom. The rest of dinner kept moving, because that's what families like mine do. They hurt you, then immediately pretend nothing happened so you don't get to react. My dad asked Ethan about his upcoming travel. My mom offered Harper more food. My aunt talked about her neighbor's new dog. And I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, smiling when I was supposed to smile, nodding when I was supposed to nod, swallowing every word I wanted to scream. Because the truth was, I didn't have the kind of job my family respected. I didn't have the kind of job they could brag about. But I did have something else, something they had no idea about. And the moment my brother told me to lie about my work, I realized the universe was about to do the talking for me. Because only a few minutes later, Harper reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She brightened like she'd remembered something. "Oh," she said, "I have to show you all something. I listen to this on long drives, and it's literally my favorite." She tapped her screen, scrolling. My dad leaned in politely. My mom smiled. Ethan looked mildly bored. And then Harper hit play. A soft intro music filled the room. And then a calm voice, steady, familiar, unmistakable, poured out of her phone speaker. My voice, Harper froze. Her eyes went wide as she stared at the screen. Then she looked up at me, and in that exact moment, the laughter died, the air changed, and every face at that table began to go pale. For a few seconds, nobody moved. It wasn't dramatic in the way movies make it dramatic. There was no gasp, no glass shattering, no sudden shouting. It was worse than that. It was the kind of silence that feels like someone turned the oxygen down in the room. My voice kept playing from Harper's phone, smooth, measured, calm. The same tone I use when I'm telling stories about betrayal and revenge, about the moment someone realizes the people they trusted were never really on their side. Only this time, the story wasn't coming from a stranger. It was coming from me. Harper's thumb hovered over the screen like it had forgotten how to work. Her smile was gone. Her eyes darted from the phone to my face, like she was trying to solve a puzzle in real time. Ethan's expression shifted so fast I almost didn't catch it. That smug grin he'd been wearing all night flickered just for a second into something else. Uncertainty. Fear. My dad stopped chewing. My mom's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Even my aunt, who never shuts up, fell quiet. The football game in the other room suddenly sounded too loud, like it was intruding on something sacred. And me? I sat perfectly still. My heart was hammering, but my face didn't change. I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. I didn't rush to explain. I just watched. Because for once in my life, I wasn't the one being put on the spot. They were. Harper finally cleared her throat, her cheeks flushing a deeper pink. "Oh my God," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "Wait, that sounds like..." She looked at me again, and I gave her the smallest shrug. "Huh," I said lightly. "Yeah, that does sound familiar." It wasn't a lie. It wasn't the truth, either. It was a door left slightly open. A chance for them to walk through it, or slam it shut. Ethan reached across the table so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. "Babe," he said, voice too cheerful, too loud. "Can you turn that down? We're eating." His tone was casual, like this was just an annoying commercial interrupting dinner. But I could see the tension in his jaw. The way his fingers clenched and unclenched on the edge of his plate. The way he wouldn't look directly at me. Harper blinked and fumbled with the phone, hitting pause. The sound cut off abruptly, leaving a strange echo behind, like the room itself still remembered my voice. And then, like magic, my mom's laugh bubbled up too quickly. "Oh," she said, forcing brightness. "That's funny. Chloe does sound like that sometimes, doesn't she?" She looked around the table, desperate for someone to agree. My dad swallowed hard and cleared his throat. "It's probably one of those AI voice things," he said, even though none of us had mentioned AI. "They can make anyone sound like anyone these days." He said it like he was saving the family from embarrassment, like he was rescuing the story from the truth. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so predictable. Ethan seized the opening immediately. "Yeah," he said, nodding fast. "Exactly. Those podcasts all sound the same anyway, like whispery and dramatic." He tried to smirk, but it didn't land. Harper didn't laugh. She just stared at the phone again, like she didn't want to believe what she'd just heard. I could tell she was a real fan, not a casual listener. She'd said it was her favorite for long drives. She'd said it like it mattered. And that meant she knew. Even if she didn't understand the full truth yet, she knew something didn't add up. The rest of dinner stumbled forward in a kind of limping awkwardness. People started talking again, but their voices were off, too loud in places, too quiet in others. Like everyone was trying to act normal while their brains screamed questions they didn't know how to ask. My aunt started talking about her neighbor's new puppy, but she kept glancing at me. My cousin asked Harper where she bought her sweater, then immediately forgot the answer. My mom kept offering dessert too early, like sugar could patch the crack in the atmosphere. Ethan talked more than anyone. He talked because he needed noise. He needed to drown out the fact that something had slipped through the cracks tonight, something he couldn't control. "So, anyway," he said, leaning back and gesturing with his fork, "we're basically leading the entire regional strategy now. My manager said he's never seen numbers like mine." My dad nodded hard, grateful to return to familiar territory. "That's my boy," he said. My mom smiled at Ethan like he was the sun, but even she looked rattled, because she'd heard it too. She'd heard that voice, the voice that sounded like her daughter, the voice that had millions of listeners, even if she didn't know that part yet. The voice that didn't sound pathetic. It sounded powerful, and I could feel something shifting in her. Not respect. Not yet. But confusion, and confusion is dangerous for people who build their entire world on certainty. I didn't speak much after that. I didn't need to. The less I said, the louder the moment became. Every time Ethan made a joke, it landed like a stone in water, no ripples. Every time my dad tried to steer the conversation, his eyes flicked toward me like he was checking for damage. Harper barely ate. I noticed her fingers twisting around the stem of her glass. I noticed the way she watched Ethan when he spoke, like she was hearing him differently now. Like she was finally noticing something that had been there all along. The meal ended the way it always ends. My mom insisted on leftovers. My dad turned the football volume up, and everyone pretended nothing important happened. But the truth was, something had happened. Something irreversible. When I stood to leave, my mom followed me into the hallway. She didn't say anything about the podcast. She didn't ask directly, but her eyes were strange, too wide, too searching. "Drive safe," she said. Her voice softened, just a little, like she was suddenly unsure how much power she actually had over me. "I will," I said. Then my dad appeared behind her, arms crossed. "Hey," he said, the word heavy with meaning. I looked at him. He held my gaze for a second, and I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. The same calculation he always does when he thinks about me. What does she contribute? What does she cost? What does she make us look like? But tonight, there was something new, a crack in the certainty. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, maybe an apology, maybe another warning, maybe another joke to regain control. Instead, he just nodded once. "See you at Christmas," he said. It wasn't a question. It was an expectation. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make him uncomfortable. Then I smiled politely. "Maybe," I said, and I walked out. The cold air hit my face like a slap as soon as I stepped onto the porch. I breathed in, deep and sharp, and felt something inside me loosen for the first time in years. Not because they'd suddenly changed. Not because they'd suddenly respected me, but because the truth had brushed past them, just for a moment, and they couldn't laugh it away completely. I drove back through the dark streets with my hands tight on the wheel. The neighborhood lights blurred into long streaks. Every stop sign felt like a memory. The first time Ethan told me I was wasting my life. The first time my dad asked when I'd get a real job. The first time my mom suggested I apply at a bank like I was asking for directions, not trying to build a dream. I thought about Harper's face when she heard my voice. That instant recognition, that instant shock. And I realized something that made my chest ache. Harper had brought my work into that house as something valuable. She had offered it like a gift. And my family, my own blood, had laughed at it 5 minutes earlier. If that wasn't proof that their opinion had nothing to do with reality, I didn't know what was. By the time I got back to my apartment, the city was quiet. My building's hallway smelled faintly like someone's laundry detergent and cold air. I climbed the stairs, unlocked my door, and stepped inside. The silence hit me harder than the cold. I tossed my keys on the counter and just stood there, staring at the dark window. My voice was still in my head, echoing from that dining room. A ghost. A warning. A promise. I turned on the small lamp by my desk and looked at my microphone in the corner. The foam panels on the wall. The cheap little setup my family called playing radio. And I felt something settle in me, something calm, something sharp. I was done waiting for them to understand. I couldn't force my parents to respect me. I couldn't rewrite Ethan into a better brother, but I could decide what they got access to. I could decide what parts of me were theirs. And maybe, just maybe, I could make sure the next time they heard my voice, it wouldn't be by accident. It would be because the world had already decided I mattered, and they were the last ones to find out. When I woke up the next morning, I still felt like I'd been holding my breath for 12 hours. It was strange, because nothing technically happened after I left. Nobody chased me down the driveway. Nobody called to apologize. Nobody texted me to ask what that podcast was. But I could feel it in my bones. Something had shifted. That brief moment at the table, my voice spilling out of Harper's phone, the laughter dying, my brother's face losing color, was still playing in my head on a loop. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I was savoring it, because for the first time in years, my family had been forced to look at me without their usual script, and they didn't know what to do. I made coffee in my tiny kitchen, the cheap kind that always tasted slightly burnt no matter how carefully I brewed it. The rain tapped softly against my window, Portland doing what Portland does. My apartment was quiet except for the hum of my refrigerator and the occasional car passing on the street below. I stood there in socks, holding my mug, staring at the corner of my living room where my recording setup sat like a secret altar. Microphone, laptop, foam panels that I'd bought online and stuck to the wall myself. A small desk, a ring light I never used because my face was never part of the brand. To my family, it looked like nothing. To me, it was everything. I sat down at my desk and opened my email, mostly out of habit. I expected the usual. Listener submissions, sponsor pitches, messages from people telling me that an episode helped them fall asleep or helped them finally put words to a pain they'd carried for years. And there were plenty of those. But that morning, one message sat at the top of my inbox like it had been waiting for me. It wasn't from my family. It wasn't from a listener. It was from someone with a corporate signature, a polished logo, and a subject line that made my pulse jump. I stared at it for a full 5 seconds before I clicked. Because even though I didn't know it yet, the universe was about to take that little crack in my family's certainty and pry it wide open. But before I tell you about that email, you need to understand something. You need to understand why my family didn't know. Because people always ask that when they hear stories like mine. Why didn't you just tell them? Why didn't you show them the numbers? Why didn't you bring proof? As if respect is something you can earn by printing out analytics and sliding them across the table. I did try. A couple of years ago, when Midnight Mirror hit its first real milestone, 100,000 subscribers, I was so proud I could barely sit still. I'd been recording in my closet back then, the walls lined with cheap foam that smelled like plastic. I was working part-time at a bookstore during the day and recording at night, whispering into a microphone so my neighbors wouldn't complain. And then suddenly, it was working. My inbox filled with sponsorship offers. People started sending me long emails about how my stories helped them feel less alone. I remember one message from a woman who said she listened to my episodes every night after her divorce because my calm voice was the only thing that kept her from spiraling. I printed out the subscriber count like an idiot. I took screenshots of the analytics. I showed my parents the way the numbers climbed week after week. I thought, maybe now they'd see. Maybe now they'd be proud. But my dad laughed. Not a small laugh, a real one, the kind that comes from the chest. "When are you going to get a real job?" he asked, like I'd told him I'd joined a circus. My mom tilted her head and said, "Well, honey, that's nice, but you can't do that forever. You should apply at the local bank. They're always hiring tellers." Ethan didn't even bother hiding his smirk. "Maybe you can put it on your resume under hobbies," he said. That was the night something inside me went cold. Not dramatic, not angry, just done. Because I realized I could spend my entire life trying to translate myself into a language they respected, and it would never matter. They didn't want to understand me. They wanted me to become someone they could brag about, so I stopped trying. I stopped giving them access to the parts of me that were growing. I stopped sharing good news. I stopped mentioning numbers. I stopped telling them about the sponsors, the collaborations, the messages from listeners. I let them believe whatever they wanted, because it was easier than watching them twist my joy into a joke. And the funny thing is, it worked. My life got quieter. My heart got safer. While Ethan was being praised for his corporate ladder, I was building something real in silence. I grew Midnight Mirror from a little channel with a handful of listeners into a brand with millions. I learned how to write scripts that held people like a hand in the dark. I learned pacing. I learned suspense. I learned how to build tension with nothing but a pause and a breath. I learned how to tell stories about revenge without turning them into cruelty. Because the truth is, I don't actually like cruelty. I like consequences. I like the moment someone realizes they can't keep hurting people for free. That's what my listeners love too. They come to Midnight Mirror for the same reason people slow down to watch lightning storms from their windows. They want to feel the danger without being in it. They want the satisfaction of seeing a truth finally surface. They want the justice that real life doesn't always deliver. And somehow, my voice became the voice they trusted for that. It still blows my mind when I think about it. 2.3 million subscribers, hundreds of thousands of plays per episode. A comment section full of strangers saying things like, "I thought I was the only one who grew up like this. My family had no idea." To them, I was still the kid who played radio. And maybe that's why Thanksgiving hit me so hard. Because it wasn't just Ethan mocking me. It was my father telling me not to embarrass them, like my existence was a stain, like my life was something shameful that needed to be hidden behind polite conversation and mashed potatoes. And the moment Harper's phone played my voice, it was like the universe whispered, "You're not crazy. You're not small. You're just surrounded by people who benefit from you believing you are." The days after Thanksgiving, I didn't text. I didn't send the usual, "Thanks for having me" message. I didn't respond in the family group chat when my mom posted pictures of leftovers. I didn't react when my aunt sent a thumbs up emoji under a photo of Ethan smiling beside Harper. I just disappeared. Not in a dramatic way. In a quiet way. The kind of quiet that makes people uncomfortable because they can't reach you. And at first, I thought maybe they'd notice. Maybe my mom would call and ask if I was okay. Maybe my dad would send a short apology, even if it was awkward. Maybe Ethan would joke less. But nothing happened, which only confirmed what I already knew. They didn't miss me. They missed the version of me who stayed in my place. So I poured myself into my work. My mornings became sharper, more focused. I woke up before the sun, made coffee, and sat at my desk with my notebook open. I outlined new episodes. I read listener submissions from around the world. A woman whose sister stole her inheritance. A man whose parents refused to acknowledge his wife for 10 years. A kid whose uncle mocked his art until it was featured in a gallery. I changed names, details, locations, but the feelings were always real. And every time I wrote, I could feel something healing in me, because it wasn't just other people's stories. It was mine, too. Around 9, I stepped into my little recording corner, adjusted the microphone, and put on my headphones. My voice changed when I recorded. It always did. It became steadier, calmer, like I was turning pain into something structured, something bearable. You would never guess that the person speaking had spent Thanksgiving clenching her jaw so tightly she gave herself a headache. But that's the magic of storytelling. It lets you hold the truth without letting it destroy you. And then, in the middle of all that listener emails, sponsor pitches, script drafts, there it was. That email, the one with the polished logo, the one with the subject line that made my hands go cold around my coffee mug, I clicked it. And the first sentence made me sit up straighter than I had in weeks. "Hello, Midnight Mirror," it began. "My name is Kara Whitmore, and I'm reaching out on behalf of Emberwave Audio with an exclusive proposal." My stomach dropped. Emberwave wasn't some random platform. Emberwave was one of the big ones, the kind that puts their logo on billboards. The kind that sponsors true crime festivals and signs exclusive deals with creators who have teams and agents and studio spaces. The kind of company my dad would call a real job, if he knew what it was. I read the email once, then again, then a third time, slower, because the numbers in it didn't feel real. They wanted to develop a limited series with me under the Midnight Mirror brand. 10 episode. Creative control, mostly in my hands. A release plan. Cross-promotion, and a payout that made my throat tighten, because it wasn't just good, it was life-changing. I leaned back in my chair and stared at my ceiling, hearing Ethan's voice in my head from Thanksgiving. "Maybe lie this time so you don't sound so pathetic." I thought about my dad's warning, "Don't embarrass us tonight," and I felt something darkly funny rise in my chest. Because if my father wanted a boss so badly, If he wanted a company so badly, if he wanted a real job he could brag about, then the universe was about to hand me exactly that, only it wouldn't be for him. It would be for me. I reached for my keyboard. My fingers hovered, and then I started typing my reply, forcing my hands to stay steady. Because the next time my family heard my voice, it wasn't going to be an accident. It was going to be everywhere. I replied to Emberwave within 5 minutes. Not because I was desperate, not because I didn't have other options, but because I knew what that email meant. I knew what kind of doors a platform like Emberwave could open, and I also knew something else, something I didn't want to admit out loud. I wanted the satisfaction of building something so undeniable that my family could never laugh at it again. Even if they never apologized, even if they never changed, even if they never deserved to know. I typed back carefully, keeping my tone professional, calm, like I wasn't sitting in sweatpants in a small Portland apartment with my heart pounding against my ribs. Thank you for reaching out. I'm interested. I'd love to learn more about the concept and the creative direction. I hit send. Then I just sat there for a moment, staring at the screen. Because once you say yes to something that big, you can't pretend your life is small anymore. You can't hide behind the version of yourself that's used to being dismissed. And for years, dismissal had been my default. It was safer that way. The next day, the Emberwave call was scheduled for noon. I spent the morning trying to act normal. I wrote a little. I edited an episode draft. I answered a few listener emails, but my focus kept slipping, like my brain was pacing in circles. By 11:30, I had cleaned my apartment twice. I made my bed. I wiped down my desk. I adjusted my microphone, even though I wasn't recording. And then, with 10 minutes to go, I sat down in front of my laptop and opened Zoom. Camera off. As always, my avatar, a simple midnight blue silhouette, floated in the corner of the screen like a mask I'd learned to live behind. When the meeting started, I expected corporate stiffness, polite phrases, a quick pitch, and a goodbye. Instead, I was greeted by smiles. 3 faces appeared: a producer, a brand strategist, and someone who introduced herself as the head of partnerships. They spoke my channel name like it mattered. "Midnight Mirror," the producer said warmly. "We're huge fans of your work." I swallowed. Nobody had ever said that to me in a way that felt official. They didn't ask for my real name. They didn't pressure me to show my face. They didn't talk down to me like I was playing pretend. They treated me like a creator with power, like someone they wanted, not someone they were tolerating. And that alone almost made me emotional. They told me they'd been tracking my audience growth for months. They mentioned specific episodes. They referenced the comments, the shares, the way listeners described my voice as the calm in the storm. Then the producer said something that made my stomach tighten in the best possible way. "We'd like to develop a limited series with you," she said. "Something focused on family expectations, the cost of being the disappointment, and the moment people finally stop shrinking." I blinked, because it felt like she'd reached through my laptop and pulled out the exact shape of my life. She explained the concept: 10 episodes, a tighter arc than my usual uploads, deeper character development, higher production value. Emberwave would handle distribution and promotion. I would keep creative control. The series would sit under my Midnight Mirror brand. Then she said the working title: Family Lines. I repeated it quietly. Family Lines. It sounded clean, sharp, like a thread being pulled until the whole sweater unravels. I liked it immediately. As they talked about release dates and marketing, my mind kept flickering back to Thanksgiving. My father's voice: "Don't embarrass us tonight." My brother's smirk, the laughter. I could see it so clearly, and I realized something that made my chest feel strange. My family had handed me the perfect opening scene for this series without even knowing it. The producer kept talking. "We want it to feel intimate," she said, like someone confessing something they've never said out loud, but also empowering, like a slow reclaiming. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Yes," I said, "that's exactly what I do." And I meant it, because the truth is, Midnight Mirror had always been about that. It had never been about screaming revenge or humiliating people for sport. It had always been about the quiet moment someone stops begging for love and starts building a life anyway. That's the kind of revenge I understand. The kind that doesn't require cruelty. Just clarity. By the end of the call, we had a plan. They sent over a formal proposal. A real contract. Real legal language. Real numbers. When I opened the document and saw the payout, my hands actually started shaking. Not because I'd never made money before I had. Midnight Mirror was successful. It paid my rent. It paid my health insurance. It paid my student loans. It had been carrying me quietly for years. But this was different. This was the kind of money my father would have called respectable. The kind of money that comes with a brand name attached. The kind of money that makes people stop laughing. I signed. I didn't even use a digital signature at first. I printed the final page and signed it with a pen, just because I wanted to feel it in my hand. I wanted proof that this wasn't another dream my family could brush off as a phase. When the paperwork was done, I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt calm, like something inside me had finally settled into place. Not because I needed Emberwave to validate me, but because I was tired of living like my work was a secret I had to apologize for. That afternoon, I went for a walk around my neighborhood. Portland was gray and wet, the air smelling like cold pavement and coffee shops. People hurried past with umbrellas. A dog barked somewhere behind a fence. And I thought about my dad. I thought about how he'd always said a real job meant having a boss. Well, congratulations, Dad. Now I had a boss. A whole team, actually. And they respected me more than you ever had. The thought was sharp, but it wasn't bitter. It was just true. When I got back home, my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. A picture of leftovers. A cheerful message. Turkey soup tomorrow. You should come by and take some home. Love you. I stared at it for a long time. Then I set my phone down without replying. Because I wasn't angry. I was exhausted. And for the first time, I gave myself permission not to perform forgiveness just because it made everyone else comfortable. Over the next week, I threw myself into the series. I outlined the arc of family lines. I created a main character who wasn't me but carried my bones. I wrote a brother who knew exactly where to stab. I wrote parents who called their cruelty jokes and their control love. I wrote holiday scenes so vivid I could smell the gravy. I changed details, of course. Different city, different ages, different names. But the feelings stayed the same, because feelings are the part you can't disguise. I recorded the first episode late at night, when the building was quiet and my mind was sharp. My voice slipped into that steady rhythm that always surprised people, the one that sounded like confidence, even when I didn't feel it. When I finished the final line, I took off my headphones and sat in silence. My throat felt raw. My eyes stung. Because it wasn't just a script, it was a confession. And somewhere in the middle of all that, between Emberwave emails, recording sessions, editing notes, I got another message. This one wasn't from a producer. It wasn't from a lawyer. It wasn't from a listener. It was from a brand, a big one. The kind of company that runs glossy campaigns and hires agencies and pays for billboards. The email subject line was simple. Potential collaboration, New Year campaign. I clicked it without thinking, and then I saw the name at the bottom. Harper James. For a second, I thought my brain was playing a trick on me. I read it again. Harper James, the same Harper who had sat at my family table. The same Harper who had looked at me with confusion and discomfort when my father and brother laughed. The same Harper who had frozen when she heard my voice on her phone. My heart beat once. Hard. The email was professional, polished, friendly. She wrote that she loved Midnight Mirror, that she admired the storytelling, that her company wanted to explore a partnership for a New Year campaign centered on self-respect, boundaries, and not letting anyone define your worth. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. The irony was so perfect, it almost hurt. My brother's girlfriend, his shiny new trophy, was a fan of the pathetic job he'd mocked. She had carried my work into that house like it was something precious. And now she was reaching out to hire me. I could have ignored it. I could have declined. I could have used it as an excuse to stay far away from that entire mess. But instead, I felt something else rise in me, a slow, quiet curiosity. Because Harper didn't just look embarrassed at Thanksgiving. She looked disturbed, like she'd seen something in my family that didn't match the version of Ethan she'd been sold. And if she was reaching out now, it meant she'd connected the dots. Maybe not fully, but enough. I typed back, keeping my tone neutral, professional, controlled. Hi, Harper. Thank you for reaching out. I'd be happy to discuss a collaboration. Let me know your availability for a call. I hit send. Then I sat there, staring at my microphone in the corner. It was funny, in a dark way. My family had spent years treating my work like a joke, and now the world was treating it like a career, a business, a brand, something people fought to be associated with. I didn't know yet what Harper wanted, or what she suspected, or whether she'd recognize me completely. But I did know one thing. The life my family refused to see was getting louder. And sooner or later, that sound was going to reach their front door again. Only next time, it wouldn't be an accident. The call with Harper's team happened the following Tuesday. By then, I'd already recorded the first 2 episodes of Family Lines, and my apartment felt less like a hiding place and more like a studio. My desk was covered in sticky notes. My notebook was full of outlines and half-written lines. My inbox had turned into a war zone of contracts, revisions, sponsor inquiries, and Emberwave check-ins. And yet, out of everything happening in my life, the thing that made my stomach twist that morning was a single name on my calendar. Harper James, 10 a.m. I woke up earlier than usual and tried to treat it like any other professional meeting. I showered, made coffee, checked my mic levels, opened my laptop, and reviewed the email thread. But no matter how many times I told myself this was just business, my mind kept replaying the moment at Thanksgiving when Harper's phone speaker had filled the room with my voice. The way she froze, the way her eyes widened, the way she looked at me like she'd just realized the ground under her feet wasn't solid. I hadn't said anything. I hadn't claimed anything. I'd given her that small shrug and that harmless line sounds familiar, and then I'd let the moment hang there, like smoke. But I knew Harper wasn't the kind of person who forgot things like that. If she was reaching out now, it meant she'd been thinking about it too. At 9:58, I joined the video call. As always, my camera stayed off. My avatar sat in the corner of the screen. My voice was the only part of me the world got to touch. The screen filled with faces Harper and 2 colleagues. One introduced herself as the creative director, the other as the media strategist. They were polished, bright, energetic in that marketing way where every sentence sounds like it's heading toward a pitch deck. Harper smiled when she saw my name pop up. "Hi," she said warmly. "Thank you so much for meeting with us." Her voice was exactly how I remembered it, confident, friendly, with a softness underneath that didn't quite match Ethan's world. "Of course," I said. "Thanks for reaching out." There was a beat, a tiny pause, and in that pause, I felt it. She knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to feel the tension. Harper cleared her throat and launched into the purpose of the call. Her company, an upscale skincare brand that ran major online campaigns, wanted to build a New Year's series centered on self-worth. They wanted content that felt intimate, honest, and emotionally grounded. Not just pretty faces and product shots, but storytelling. "We've been exploring voices that already have trust," Harper said. "And Midnight Mirror is, honestly, one of the strongest." I kept my tone steady. "I'm glad it resonates," I said. Harper laughed lightly. "It resonates a lot," she said. "Your audience doesn't just listen. They cling, in a good way." Her colleagues nodded. The creative director pulled up a slide deck and started describing the campaign concept. Visuals of people washing off makeup, writing down the expectations they were letting go of, choosing themselves. My narration would weave through it like a thread. I listened, asked questions, kept it professional, but the entire time, Harper kept circling back to one thing, a specific episode. She didn't say it at first, but I could tell. Her eyes kept flicking down to her notes, then back up, like she was trying to decide whether to mention it. Finally, about 20 minutes in, she did. "There's one story you did recently," she said carefully. "The holiday dinner one." My spine went a little straighter. I said. Harper exhaled, and I heard something honest in it, something that wasn't marketing. "That one," she said. It made my stomach hurt. It sounded so real. I swallowed, because I knew exactly which story she meant. The one that wasn't really a story. The one that was my life. I kept my voice calm. "I write from a mix of submissions and personal experience," I said. "Holidays bring out complicated dynamics." Harper nodded so quickly it was almost too fast. "Exactly," she said. "Complicated is the nicest word for it." Her colleague jumped in with a question about timeline, deliverables, voiceover pacing, but Harper stayed quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, it was softer. "My boyfriend's family can be kind of intense," she said, almost like a joke, "so I really relate." She didn't say Ethan's name. She didn't have to. I heard him anyway, like an echo. I kept my response neutral. But inside, something cold and clear clicked into place. Harper wasn't just a fan. She was starting to see. The call moved on. We discussed script structure, how many pieces I'd deliver, whether the tone should lean more empowering or more raw. They wanted 3 narrations, each about 2 minutes long, released as part of a New Year push. Then the media strategist talked numbers, budget, paid placements, cross-promotion. And when she mentioned the amount they were offering me, I almost laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. They were offering to pay me more for 3 short scripts than my parents had earned in a year when we were kids. More than Ethan would probably make in several months of bragging about his quarterly bonuses. I didn't react. I didn't let my voice change. "I can work with that," I said. Harper smiled like she'd just secured the best deal of her career. When the call ended, I sat at my desk for a long moment with my headphones still on, listening to the quiet hum of my apartment. My phone buzzed almost immediately. A text from my mom. "Christmas Eve plans soon. Are you coming? Ethan and Harper will be here again." I stared at the screen. The timing was so perfect it felt scripted. My first instinct was to say no. To stay in my apartment, order takeout, and spend the holiday with my laptop and my audience, the people who actually listen to me. Because being alone sounded safer than sitting at that table again. But then I thought about Harper. The way she'd frozen at Thanksgiving. The way she'd spoken on the call about intense families, her voice carrying a weight she tried to disguise. And I thought about Ethan. The way he'd laughed, the way he'd told me to lie so I wouldn't sound pathetic. I thought about my dad's warning, "Don't embarrass us tonight." And something in me shifted, not into rage, into resolve, because I was tired of my family living in a fantasy where I was still the failure they'd assigned me to be. I didn't want to rub anything in their faces. I didn't want to humiliate them. I just wanted to stop pretending. So I texted my mom back, "I'll come for dinner." 3 simple words. My mom replied instantly with a string of heart emojis and a cheerful message about how happy she was. And for a second, I almost felt guilty, because I knew what I was walking into. Not a fight, a reckoning. The next few weeks blurred together. Emberwave sent notes on my first episodes. Their team was fast, sharp, supportive. They treated me like a partner, not a hobbyist. They asked for minor edits, suggested music cues, and sent me early mock-ups of the series banner. When I saw the Midnight Mirror logo next to Emberwave's name, something inside me tightened. This was real, and it was about to be public. Family Lines launched with a quiet confidence. Emberwave released the first episode on a Friday morning. I expected it to do well. I did not expect what happened next. By noon, the comments were flooding in. By evening, the episode was trending on their platform. People were quoting lines back to me. People were tagging friends. People were writing long paragraphs about their own families, their own holiday dinners, their own moments of being laughed at. A Reddit thread popped up that weekend titled something like, "This narrator just destroyed her family without raising her voice." I stared at it, half amused, half unsettled, because they weren't wrong. I hadn't raised my voice, but I had stopped shrinking. And apparently, that was enough to feel like destruction to people who were used to controlling the story. My listener numbers jumped. My inbox filled with new sponsor offers. Emberwave emailed me, congratulating me, calling the launch one of the strongest starts we've seen this quarter. And in the middle of all that, Harper's team sent over the contract for the skincare campaign. It was official. My voice would be part of a New Year campaign that would run everywhere online. My narration would play under glossy visuals and brand logos and paid placements. My voice, the one my father had told me not to embarrass them with, was about to be broadcast as something aspirational. I signed the contract the same way I'd signed the Emberwave one. Slowly, deliberately. Like I was claiming something I'd been denied permission to have. And then I went back to writing. Because the strangest part of all of this wasn't the money. It wasn't the contracts. It wasn't the numbers. It was the way my life outside my family was growing so loud, so undeniable, that it was starting to feel impossible for them not to hear it. Even if I never told them. Even if I never explained. Even if I never asked for their approval again. As Christmas got closer, my mom texted more. Little updates, menu plans, questions about what dessert I liked. My dad called once. I let it go to voicemail. His message was short, clipped, irritated in that way he always got when he didn't have control. Hey, Chloe, don't take Thanksgiving so seriously. We were just joking. Family is all you have. I deleted it without replying because I was done being told that love and humiliation were the same thing. I was recording the 4th episode of Family Lines that night, and the opening line was about a girl sitting at a holiday table, swallowing her pain while her family laughed. My voice was calm, measured, almost soothing. But behind it, there was something new. A certainty, because I knew what was coming. Christmas dinner was only days away, and this time, I wouldn't be walking into that house as the family disappointment. I'd be walking in as the voice they'd already heard, the one they couldn't laugh off, the one the world had decided was worth listening to. And whether they were ready or not, the truth was coming to sit at the table. The night I drove back for Christmas, the sky looked like it was holding its breath. The clouds hung low and heavy, and the highway lights smeared into long, pale streaks across my windshield. Every few miles, my phone buzzed with another cheerful message from my mom, little reminders about the schedule, the menu, the fact that Ethan and Harper were already there. I didn't answer most of them, not because I wanted to punish her, because I was trying to keep myself steady. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other wrapped around a paper cup of gas station coffee that tasted like regret. The farther I got from Portland, the more I felt that old, familiar tightening in my chest, the one that always showed up when I got close to my parents' house. It didn't matter how much my life had changed. The road back still made me feel like I was driving toward a version of myself I'd outgrown. I arrived just after dark. The house looked exactly the same as it always had, like time had politely refused to touch it. The porch posts were wrapped in lights. The wreath was on the door. The windows glowed warm and golden, and for a moment, it almost looked like the kind of home people wrote Christmas songs about. Almost. When I stepped inside, the smell hit me first: ham, cinnamon, pine, and that overly sweet candle scent my mom always bought in bulk. Chloe, my mom called, rushing toward me like she hadn't seen me in years instead of weeks. She hugged me too tightly, like she was trying to squeeze the awkwardness out of my ribs. Then she pulled back and scanned my face. "You look tired," she said immediately. "Are you eating enough?" I smiled. "I'm fine." She nodded quickly, satisfied with the simplest answer, then grabbed my coat and hung it up like she was resetting the stage. My dad appeared from the living room with a drink in his hand. He patted my shoulder again, the same gesture as Thanksgiving, half affection, half ownership. "Hey," he said, "made it." That was all. No apology. No mention of the last holiday. Just a neutral greeting, like we were co-workers who'd bumped into each other in the hallway. Then Ethan walked in. Pressed shirt, perfect hair, drink already in his hand. The grin he wore was practiced, like he'd been performing it in the mirror. "Look who decided to show up," he said. He didn't hug me. He never did. He just leaned in slightly, like he was sharing a joke with the room. Harper stood behind him, holding a plate of appetizers my mom had probably shoved into her hands to make her feel included. She looked different than she had at Thanksgiving, not less polished, just less relaxed. Her smile was smaller. Her eyes were sharper, like she'd been paying attention for the past few weeks. When she saw me, she nodded. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi," I replied. Our eyes held for a second longer than normal, and in that second, I felt it. She knew, not in a dramatic, confrontational way. In the quiet, uncomfortable way you know when someone has seen behind the curtain and can't unsee it. The living room was full of the same familiar sounds, the TV playing a generic Christmas movie, the clink of glasses, my mom bustling around asking if everyone wanted more food. I tried to stay calm. I reminded myself that I didn't come here to fight. I came here to stop shrinking. At the dinner table, the seating arrangement was almost identical to Thanksgiving, like my mom had copied and pasted the entire scene. My dad at the head, my mom beside him, Ethan near the center, like the main character, Harper next to Ethan, smiling politely. Me placed just slightly off to the side, like an afterthought. Even the tablecloth was the same, only the stakes had changed. Dinner started smoothly, too smoothly. Everyone talked about safe things, traffic, weather, a neighbor's new dog. My mom asked Harper about her work, and Harper answered politely, mentioning marketing and campaign planning. My dad nodded like he understood. Ethan interrupted to brag about his own work, of course. He talked about a big client he'd landed. He talked about his company's future direction. He talked about how he was being considered for a bigger role next year. My parents soaked it up like sunlight, and I watched Harper's face while he spoke. At first, she smiled, then she stopped. Not dramatically, just gradually, like her patience was draining in real time. Because Ethan didn't just talk about work. He talked about himself. He talked like everyone in the room existed to be impressed. And I could see Harper noticing it now in a way she hadn't at Thanksgiving. Like she was finally hearing the tone underneath the words. Then, about 20 minutes into dinner, Ethan turned his attention back to me. It was so casual, it almost sounded harmless. "So," he said, swirling his drink, "how's your little online thing going?" My dad chuckled, the sound warm with superiority. "Still playing radio up in Portland?" he added. My mom smiled too, but her smile was nervous. Like she knew she should stop it. Like she didn't know how. I felt my jaw tighten. Not because the words were new, because I could feel the pattern trying to reassert itself. The family story they loved. Ethan, the success. Chloe, the joke. I took a slow sip of water and kept my voice even. "It's going well," I said. Ethan lifted his eyebrows. "Oh yeah?" he said. "Gotten any sponsors lately?" The way he said sponsors made it sound like he was talking about a lemonade stand. My dad laughed again. Harper's fork stopped mid-air. The room shifted. It was subtle, but I felt it. Harper set her fork down very gently, the way people do when they're trying not to make a scene. Then she looked at me, not at Ethan, not at my parents, at me, and her voice cut through the table like a clean blade. "I've actually been meaning to thank you," she said. The words were calm, but the effect was instant. My mom blinked in confusion. My dad's smile faltered. Ethan froze like he hadn't understood what she meant. "What?" my dad said, laughing awkwardly. "Thank her for what?" Harper didn't smile. She kept her gaze on me. "Your voice has been saving my department for the past month," she said. Silence. My dad's eyebrows pulled together. Ethan's eyes flicked to me, then back to Harper, like he was trying to decide whether to interrupt. My mom's mouth opened, then closed again. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. Harper reached into her bag and pulled out a remote. I realized then that she'd planned this, not as revenge, as truth. She pointed the remote at the TV in the corner. I'd barely noticed it earlier because it was playing some forgettable Christmas movie in the background. Harper clicked the input button, and the screen went black for a moment. Then a streaming app appeared. Emberwave. My dad leaned forward slightly. "What is this?" he asked. Harper didn't answer him. She scrolled, fast and confident, like she'd done this before. And then the Emberwave homepage loaded. A banner stretched across the top of the screen. Bold, professional, undeniable. Family Lines, a Midnight Mirror original series. The Midnight Mirror logo sat beside it, sleek and familiar. Underneath was a tagline about breaking free from toxic expectations. My stomach tightened. Even though I'd seen it on my laptop a dozen times, seeing it on my parents' television felt like watching a secret become physical. Harper hit play. The intro music filled the room. Soft, eerie. And then my voice poured out of the speakers. Not from a phone this time. From the TV. From the center of the room. From a place my family couldn't ignore. I heard my own opening line, calm, steady, intimate, about a girl sitting at a holiday table while her family laughed at her. My mom's fork froze halfway to her mouth. My dad stared at the screen like it had personally insulted him. Ethan's face drained of color. And Harper muted the TV after a few seconds, letting the silence do the rest. My company, she said, still calm, has been running a huge campaign this month using Chloe's narration. Midnight Mirror is one of the biggest channels on Emberwave right now. And Family Lines is the series everyone's talking about. My mom made a small sound in her throat. My dad blinked slowly, like his brain was buffering. You mean, he started, voice rough, that little show she does? Harper's eyes sharpened. It's not a little show, she said. It's a business. Ethan tried to laugh. A thin, shaky laugh that didn't belong to him. Okay, he said quickly. This is just internet stuff. People watch anything. I finally spoke. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. My channel paid for my taxes this year, I said. It paid for my retirement account. It paid for my health insurance. It's paying for the down payment on a future house. Ethan's smile collapsed. I looked at him directly. It also paid for the student loans you told me were my problem alone, I added. And Emberwave is paying me more for one series than you made in your first 5 years at that company. The room went dead silent. My mom whispered, barely audible, Why? Why didn't you tell us? I turned to her, really turned, and I saw it panic, shame, and something that might have been regret wrestling behind her eyes. Because the last time I tried, I said quietly, you laughed. My dad shifted in his chair, uncomfortable. He opened his mouth like he was about to defend himself. Like he was about to say he'd been joking. Harper cut him off before he could. She turned to Ethan. Did you know? She asked him. Voice flat. Did you know your sister reaches millions of people? Ethan stammered. No, he said. I mean, I didn't realize it was that big. Harper stared at him for a long moment. Then she said something that made my dad's face go even paler. My boss knows who Midnight Mirror is, she said quietly. He told me last week that getting this collaboration was the best thing I've done all quarter. Ethan swallowed. Harper's gaze didn't move. And your company, she added, has been trying to pitch a partnership to us next year. Ethan's eyes widened. My dad's drink trembled slightly in his hand. Harper leaned forward just a little. Do you understand, she said, how bad it looks that you sit here and laugh at the person we're building campaigns around? Ethan had no answer. And for the first time in my life, I watched my brother shrink. Not because I attacked him, because the truth finally had witnesses. Dinner didn't recover after that. The rest of the meal limped forward under a thick blanket of awkwardness. My mom barely ate. My dad avoided looking at me. Ethan kept trying to make small talk, but his voice sounded wrong, too thin, too careful. Harper barely touched her plate, and when the dishes were cleared and my mom brought out dessert, Harper stood up. I need some air, she said. She didn't look at Ethan when she said it. I followed her onto the porch without thinking. The cold hit my face like a wake-up slap. Our breath fogged in the air. The Christmas lights outside blinked softly, innocent and pretty, like they didn't know what had just happened inside. Harper wrapped her arms around herself and stared out into the yard. I'm sorry, she said finally, voice low, for what they said to you, for not saying anything at Thanksgiving. I swallowed. You didn't owe me that, I said, but my voice came out softer than I expected. Harper shook her head. I should have, she said. I knew something was off. The way they talked about you, the way Ethan laughed. She hesitated. Then she added, quieter, listening to your episodes afterward just made it worse. We stood there in silence for a moment, and then Harper said the sentence that told me everything was about to change. I can't be with someone who talks about people like that, she said, especially when my whole job is telling women their worth isn't defined by anyone else. The porch door creaked behind us, and I didn't have to turn around to know Ethan was stepping outside, because I could already feel him approaching, panicked, desperate, finally realizing the cost of the person he'd been when he thought nobody important was watching. Ethan stepped onto the porch like he was walking into a courtroom. The warm glow from the living room spilled out behind him, outlining his shoulders in yellow light, but his face was pale enough that it almost looked gray in the cold. He didn't have his confident grin anymore. He didn't have his sales voice. He didn't even have a joke. For the first time in my life, my brother looked like someone had taken away the one thing he'd always relied on: control. "Harper," he said, forcing her name out like it was supposed to fix everything. "What are you doing?" Harper didn't flinch. She didn't turn around right away. She kept her eyes on the yard, on the lights, on the quiet street beyond the fence. "I'm breathing," she said simply. Ethan laughed, just one sharp sound, not humor, more like panic. "You're making this weird," he said. "It's Christmas." Harper finally turned to face him. Her expression wasn't angry. That was what made it so devastating. Anger would have given him something to argue with, something to blame, something to twist into a fight he could win. But Harper looked disappointed, like she'd been handed the truth and couldn't put it back. "I'm not making anything weird," she said calmly. "Your family already did that." Ethan's eyes flicked to me for a second, like he wanted me to disappear so this could go back to being a conversation between him and Harper. Like I was still the inconvenience he could ignore. But I didn't move. I just stood there, my hands tucked into my coat pockets, letting the cold keep me grounded. Harper spoke again, her voice low but steady. "I listened to Midnight Mirror for years," she said. "I didn't know it was Chloe, but I knew that voice. I knew what those stories were about." Ethan's face tightened. "You didn't know," he insisted, as if that was the only part that mattered. "You didn't know it was her. So why are you acting like I did something terrible?" Harper blinked slowly. "Because you did," she said. The words landed cleanly. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. He tried again, softer this time. "Babe, come on. It's family. We tease each other. That's just how we are." Harper's eyes didn't soften. "That's not teasing," she said. "That's humiliation." Ethan's throat bobbed. He glanced past her into the window, where my parents' silhouettes moved around the dining room like ghosts. The house was still full of life plates being cleared, my mom probably trying to salvage the evening with dessert and forced smiles. But out here, on the porch, the truth had no distractions. Ethan's voice shifted into something more pleading. "I didn't know it was that big," he said. "Okay? I didn't know she had millions of people listening." Harper's jaw tightened. "That's what you're focusing on?" she asked. "The size?" Ethan blinked. "What else am I supposed to focus on?" he snapped, then immediately tried to soften it. "I mean, of course I'm proud of her. Harper cut him off. "You were proud of her 5 minutes ago?" she asked. "When you called her work pathetic? When you told her to lie so she wouldn't embarrass your family?" Ethan's eyes widened. "I didn't." "You did," Harper said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't attack. She just stated facts. And Ethan, for once, couldn't talk his way around facts. He looked at me again, and there was something raw in his expression. Not remorse. Not yet. More like the shock of realizing I wasn't the powerless little sister anymore. "Chloe," he said, trying a new angle, "why didn't you tell us? Why did you hide it?" I almost laughed. Because the audacity of that question after years of mocking me was so perfectly Ethan, I kept my voice even. "I didn't hide it," I said. "I stopped offering it." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means I tried," I said. "And you laughed. So I learned." Ethan's face flushed. "That was years ago," he said. "You can't hold that against me forever." Harper turned slightly, her gaze sharp. "Years ago?" she repeated. "Ethan, you did it tonight." The cold air made everything clearer. I could see Ethan's breath puffing out, quick and uneven. I could see the way he kept shifting his weight, like he was looking for the right stance, the right posture to regain authority. He didn't know what to do when his usual tricks didn't work. Finally, he did what he always did, when he felt cornered. He blamed our upbringing. "You don't understand," he said, looking at Harper. "This is how my dad is. This is how our family talks. If you grew up with it, you'd get it." Harper stared at him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "I do get it." Ethan blinked. Harper's voice softened, not for him, but because she was telling the truth. "I grew up in a house where love came with conditions," she said, "where you had to perform to be accepted, where people called it joking, but it was just control." Ethan looked stunned, and I felt a strange ache in my chest. Because suddenly Harper wasn't just Ethan's girlfriend. She was someone who had recognized the pattern, someone who knew exactly what it cost. Harper took a breath. "I can't build a life with someone who thinks that's normal," she said. "I can't build a life with someone who laughs at people to feel bigger." Ethan's face tightened. "So you're breaking up with me because of my sister?" he demanded, voice rising. Harper didn't flinch. "No," she said. "I'm breaking up with you because of you." The sentence hung in the air like frost. Ethan's eyes went glassy for a second. He looked like he wanted to argue, to insult, to twist it into something else, but he couldn't. Because Harper wasn't reacting emotionally. She wasn't giving him a messy scene. She wasn't begging him to understand. She was leaving him with the mirror, and he hated what he saw. He took a step closer, lowering his voice, trying to pull her back into the familiar script. "Harper," he said, "please, don't do this. You're overreacting." Harper shook her head. "I'm not," she said. "I've been reacting to little things for months. The way you talk about waiters, the way you talk about people who don't have real jobs, the way you roll your eyes when I tell you what my work is about." Ethan's face flickered. That was new. That wasn't about me. That was about him. His pattern, his contempt. And I watched him realize, in real time, that this wasn't a one-night problem. This was his personality finally catching up with him. He turned to me again, desperation creeping into his voice. "Chloe," he said, Tell her you're not mad. Tell her this is just family stuff." I stared at him, and for a moment, I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who used to share his fries with me when we were kids, the one who used to sit beside me on the couch and laugh at stupid cartoons. But that boy had been buried under years of entitlement, and I wasn't going to dig him up for Ethan's convenience. I shook my head slowly. "I'm not going to manage your relationship," I said quietly. "I've managed your ego long enough." Ethan flinched like I'd slapped him. Harper's eyes flicked to me, and something like gratitude flashed there. Not because I'd saved her, because I'd refused to save him. Inside the house, I heard my mom's voice call Ethan's name. "Ethan, Dessert." The sound was almost comical, like the universe was trying to continue the holiday script even as the truth tore it apart. Ethan looked back toward the door, then at Harper, then at me. He was trapped between the version of himself he performed for his parents and the version of himself Harper had finally seen. He chose the only thing he knew. He tried to bargain. "If you walk away," he said to Harper, "you're making a huge mistake." Harper nodded slowly. "Maybe," she said, "but staying would be the bigger one." She turned away from him then, not dramatically, just decisively. She looked at me. "I'm sorry," she said again, softer, "for what they did to you." I nodded. "I know," I said. Ethan made a sound behind us, half anger, half disbelief. "You're really going to leave?" he demanded. Harper didn't answer. She walked down the porch steps, her boots crunching lightly on the frozen grass. She moved toward her car, parked along the curb, the Christmas lights reflecting off the windshield. Ethan followed her 2 steps, then stopped, like he couldn't bear to chase her too far in front of the neighbors. He stood there, shaking, staring at her back. And for the first time, I saw my brother experience what it felt like to be dismissed. To have someone decide he wasn't worth explaining things to anymore. Harper opened her car door and paused. She turned back one last time, not to him, to me. "Keep telling your stories," she said quietly. Then she got in and drove away. The taillights disappeared down the street, swallowed by the dark. Ethan stood frozen, breathing hard, and I didn't feel triumph. Not the kind people expect in revenge stories. I felt something else. A calm, steady certainty. Because this wasn't revenge I'd engineered. This was consequence. Ethan turned to me slowly, his eyes sharp with humiliation. "This is your fault," he said, voice low. I looked at him. "No," I said. "This is who you are when you think nobody important is listening." His face twisted. He opened his mouth to argue, to lash out, to blame me again. But then the porch door opened behind us, and my dad stepped out, squinting into the cold. "What's going on out here?" he asked, irritation in his voice. "Why are you making a scene?" Ethan flinched. My dad's gaze swept over us, then toward the street where Harper had disappeared. "What happened?" he demanded. Ethan swallowed. And for the first time, he didn't have an answer that sounded impressive. He just stood there, the golden child suddenly exposed as nothing but a man who'd been laughing at his sister to feel tall. My dad looked at me, eyes narrowing. "Chloe," he said, as if I was the problem. "What did you say?" I held his gaze, and I didn't smile this time. "I didn't say anything," I said calmly. "I just stopped letting you laugh." The silence that followed was heavier than the cold, and when we walked back inside, the warmth of the house didn't feel comforting anymore. It felt like a stage. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't willing to play my role. When I stepped back into the dining room, the warmth hit my skin, but it didn't reach anything deeper than that. The house smelled like cinnamon and baked sugar, like it was trying its hardest to convince everyone we were still having a normal Christmas. My mom was standing by the counter with a pie server in her hand, smiling too brightly, her eyes flicking between the doorway and the table like she was waiting for the universe to reset. Ethan walked in behind me, his shoulders stiff. My dad followed, irritation still clinging to him like smoke. "What was that?" my mom asked immediately, voice pitched high with forced cheer. "Where's Harper?" Nobody answered. Ethan grabbed his drink like it was the only thing keeping him upright. My dad pulled his chair out too roughly and sat down like he could physically pin the evening back into place. My mom hesitated, then laughed softly. "Oh," she said, waving her hand. "Young people, you know, sometimes they just need air." Her eyes landed on Ethan. He didn't look at her. The silence spread across the table like spilled ink. I sat down in my seat and folded my hands in front of me. My heart was still pounding from the porch, but the strange thing was, I felt calm. Not because I was happy, because I was finally done. My dad cleared his throat and tried to take control. "Let's just finish dessert," he said, voice sharp. "No more drama." No more drama. Like I'd been the one who made a joke out of my own life. Like Harper had walked out because she was bored. Like Ethan hadn't been exposed in front of everyone. My mom placed a slice of pie on Ethan's plate with trembling hands. "Honey," she said softly, "what happened?" Ethan finally looked up. His eyes were red not from tears, exactly, but from humiliation, the kind that burns. "She's overreacting," he muttered. My dad nodded immediately, grateful for anything that made Ethan the victim again. "Exactly," he said. "People are too sensitive these days." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was the same line my father had used my entire life. Too sensitive, too dramatic, too emotional. The words people use when they want to hurt you without admitting they're hurting you. My mom glanced at me, and for the first time all night, her eyes didn't look annoyed. They looked scared. "Chloe," she said quietly, "is it true that show—" My dad snapped his head toward her. "Linda," he warned, but she ignored him. Her gaze stayed on me, and something in it cracked. "Is that really you?" she whispered. The room held its breath. Ethan stared at the table. My dad's jaw clenched. I didn't answer right away. Not because I wanted to punish them, because I needed them to sit in the silence they'd spent years forcing me to swallow. Finally, I nodded. "Yes," I said. One word. Simple. Undeniable. My mom's mouth opened, then closed again. She looked like she was trying to rearrange her entire understanding of me in real time. My dad's face tightened. He leaned forward, his voice dropping into that tone he used when he thought he was being reasonable. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked. I stared at him. "You mean, after the last time I did her?" I said softly. His eyes flickered. He knew. He remembered. He just didn't want to. My mom's voice trembled. We didn't know it was real, she said. That word, real. It hit me like a slap. Because the truth was, it had always been real. Even when I was recording in a closet. Even when I was eating ramen for dinner. Even when I was working 2 jobs and writing scripts at midnight. It had been real when nobody cared. It was only real to them now because someone else had validated it. Because a platform logo was on the screen. Because Harper, someone they respected, had said it out loud. I felt something rise in my chest. Not anger. A kind of sadness so clean it almost felt like relief. I tried, I said. I showed you the analytics. I showed you the emails. I told you I was proud, and you laughed. My dad shifted, uncomfortable. That was, he started. A joke. I finished for him. Yeah, that's what you always call it. My mom's eyes filled with tears. Ethan finally spoke, voice tight. So what? He snapped. You made some money talking into a microphone. That doesn't mean... Harper's words from earlier flashed in my mind. It's a business. It's not a little show. I looked at Ethan. It means I built something, I said, while you were laughing. Ethan's face went red. My dad slammed his fork down. Enough, he barked. This is still my house. There it was. The real power my father believed in. Not love, not respect, ownership. His house, his rules, his version of reality. I took a slow breath, and I did something I'd never done before. I didn't back down. I'm not here to fight, I said calmly. I'm here because I'm your daughter, but I'm done being treated like I'm embarrassing. My dad stared at me like he didn't recognize my voice when it wasn't asking for permission. My mom wiped her cheek with a napkin. Chloe, she whispered, we're proud of you. The words sounded strange in her mouth, like a sentence she'd never practiced. I looked at her, and I wanted to believe her. I wanted to let it wash over me like warm water, but it was too late for that kind of comfort. Being proud now, I said gently, doesn't erase the years you weren't. My mom flinched. My dad's face hardened. Ethan muttered something under his breath. And then, in the middle of all that tension, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't check it, but the vibration felt symbolic. My real life calling. The world outside this dining room. The world that didn't require me to shrink to be loved. I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor, and every head snapped toward me. My mom's voice panicked. Where are you going? I looked at her. I'm going home, I said. My dad's eyebrows shot up. You just got here, he said, offended. You're leaving because of this? I shook my head. No, I said. I'm leaving because I've spent my whole life staying in rooms where I'm treated like a joke. Ethan scoffed. Oh my God, he muttered. So dramatic. I turned to him, my voice still calm. You're right, I said. It is dramatic. That's why I make a living telling stories. For a second, even my dad looked stunned. My mom stood up too quickly, knocking her chair back. Chloe, please, she said, tears spilling now. Don't go. We didn't mean it. We love you. I believed she loved me, in her way. But love without respect is just a leash. I picked up my coat from the hallway and slipped it on slowly. My hands were steady. My dad followed me to the door. His voice was lower now, quieter. He looked tired. Family is all you have, he said again, like it was a spell. I paused with my hand on the doorknob, and for the first time, I said the truth out loud. No, I said softly. Family is supposed to be what you have, but when it isn't, you build your own. My dad's mouth tightened. He didn't know how to respond to that. My mom stood behind him, crying quietly. Ethan was still at the table, staring at his plate like it was the only thing keeping him from exploding. I opened the door and stepped out into the cold. The air hit my lungs clean and sharp. I walked to my car, started the engine, and sat there for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Over the next few weeks, the consequences unfolded in ways I didn't expect. Harper didn't come back. Ethan texted me once, 2 days after Christmas. Are you happy now? I stared at the message for a long time. Then I deleted it. Because the truth was, I wasn't happy about any of it. I wasn't happy that my brother lost someone who might have made him better. I wasn't happy that my parents had finally realized what they'd been laughing at only when it was displayed on their TV like a trophy. But I was relieved, because the illusion was gone. A few weeks into January, I heard through a mutual friend that Ethan's company didn't move forward on the partnership they'd been courting with Harper's brand. Officially, it was strategic changes. Unofficially, people in leadership had decided Ethan wasn't the kind of person they wanted representing them in a campaign about self-respect. The promotion Ethan had been bragging about quietly evaporated. My parents never mentioned it. They never mentioned Harper again either. But one morning, while I was checking my subscriber analytics out of habit, I noticed 2 new subscribers on the Family Line series. The usernames looked suspiciously familiar. Robert L. Linder. I stared at the screen for a long time. My chest tightened, not with triumph, with something that felt like grief, because it meant they were listening now. After all these years, after all the jokes, after all the nights I'd sat alone in my apartment wondering if I was crazy for wanting what I wanted, they were listening now. A month later, my mom emailed me, not a text. An email, long, careful, like she'd written it, deleted it, rewritten it, then sat staring at it for an hour before hitting send. She said they'd been listening to Family Lines. She said some episodes were hard to hear because they recognized themselves in the parents who brushed off their child's pain as sensitivity. She apologized for calling my work a phase. She apologized for making me feel like love meant becoming someone else. At the end, my dad added a short paragraph. He didn't say sorry, but he said he'd been wrong about what counts as a real job. He said he was proud that I could support myself doing something I created. I read the email twice. Then I set my phone down and stared at my ceiling. It didn't erase Thanksgiving. It didn't erase the years. But it was something, I replied. Not with forgiveness poured like syrup. With boundaries. I thanked them for the apology. I told them I was open to staying in touch, but I needed them to understand something clearly. My life wasn't a project for them to evaluate anymore. I would visit when I felt ready, not out of obligation. I would share what I wanted to share, not what they demanded. And if they wanted to be part of my life, they would have to learn how to listen without laughing. A few days later, my dad called. His voice was awkward, quiet. He didn't know how to talk to me when he wasn't correcting me. But he tried. "Hey," he said. "Your mom said you might come by sometime." "Maybe," I said. There was a pause. Then he said something I never thought I'd hear. "I didn't realize," he admitted. "I didn't realize what you built." I closed my eyes. Neither did I. Sometimes. Not fully. Not until I stopped begging for permission to be proud of it. A few months passed. I moved into a slightly bigger apartment with an actual office. Emberwave renewed Family Lines for a second season. The skincare campaign won an industry award for storytelling, and Harper's company asked me to consult on their next one. I started running small online workshops, teaching other creators how to build anonymous brands, how to protect themselves while still telling stories that mattered. And every time I sat down at my microphone, I remembered that table. The laughter, the shame, the moment my voice came out of a phone speaker and changed the air in the room. Because the strangest part of all of this wasn't that my family finally saw me. It was that millions of strangers had seen me first. They'd listened. They'd believed. They'd understood the weight of being the one who doesn't fit the family mold. And under every Family Lines episode, the comments kept coming. People wrote about being mocked for majoring in art, about being told their small businesses were just hobbies, about sitting at holiday tables where everyone praised the child with the office job and ignored the one who built something on their own. They said things like, "Hearing this makes me feel less crazy." It wasn't just me. That was the point. My revenge was never really about Ethan losing a girlfriend or a promotion. Those were consequences, not goals. What I wanted more than anything was to stop living as the ashamed version of myself they'd written, to stop letting them define what was real, to stop letting their laughter shrink my life. And if you've ever had someone laugh at your dreams across a table full of food, if you've ever been told to lie about who you are so you don't embarrass the people who are supposed to love you, then you already know how heavy that fork can feel in your hand. Here's what I learned. You don't have to convince them. You don't have to drag them to understanding. You build the life that makes sense to you. You surround yourself with people who see you clearly, and you set boundaries with the people who refuse. Sometimes life lines it up, so the people who mocked you are forced to see exactly what they were laughing at. Their faces might go pale. They might lose things they thought were guaranteed. That's not your job to manage. Your job is to keep telling your story, whatever form that takes, and to remember that their inability to see your value doesn't erase it. If there's one thing this story proves, it's that the people who laugh at your dreams usually aren't laughing because your work is small. They're laughing because they're scared it might be bigger than the box they built for you. Chloe didn't win by screaming, insulting, or humiliating anyone. She won by staying calm, building quietly, and letting reality speak when the time was right. The most painful part wasn't even the mockery. It was hearing it come from the people who were supposed to protect her. But the most powerful part was realizing she never needed their permission to be proud. And maybe that's why this story hits so hard, because so many of us have sat at a table like that, smiling through the jokes, swallowing the shame, wondering if we're the problem, when really, we're just surrounded by people who refuse to see us. So if you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or told to be realistic, I hope this story reminded you of something important. Your life is still yours to build. If you want more stories like this, raw, emotional, and deeply satisfying, subscribe to Revenge Tale Society. Your story deserves to be heard, too.